Hi, I'm Leslie Clayton with the Joyous Heart Network, and I'm here with my wonderful friend and breathwork facilitator, Ruby Falconer from the Transformation House in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. Welcome, Ruby, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're doing this series of conversations about how to heal sexual trauma. And in sexual trauma, it's a pretty broad subject. It's men and women healing. It's healing from childhood sexual trauma or even from perceived, assaults or harassments from workplace environments that could be, these days, it's a pretty big topic. This is 2018, and we're in the Me Too movement happening. And I don't know if we're in the middle of it or if we're on the other side of it yet. I kind of think we're kind of just getting started, hopefully moving this process of healing forward. So one of the things that we're wanting to look at is some of the ways that sexual abuse or trauma can show up and manifest physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually in the body. It can show up in real life situations right now, something that happened a long time ago or something that happened last week. So I'm just gonna let you take that from what's moving in your awareness. Like, where do you want to take that question for how it manifests in the body right now or in the life right now?
Oh, thank you, Leslie. I think what I want to do is maybe share a little bit of my own experience because I grew up in a household with very murky sexual boundaries. And while I do not recall any overt sexual abuse, I'm one of those people who, if other people who were knowledgeable in the field would look at me, would say, you probably experienced sexual trauma. So what I can know about myself is either I was extremely sensitive to the murky sexual boundaries where there's a lot of discomfort around sexuality and a lot of lack of clarity and really poor boundaries coming specifically from my father, who was an overt alcoholic. And my mother was what, might be called a flaming codependent, an enabler, covered up a lot of his behaviors. I was an only child. So I was really very much alone in this situation. And as a result of all of this, what I can say is I did not grow up with a very strong sense of self. Okay. And so because I did not have a strong sense of self, I did not know what I wanted in life or what I didn't want in life. So I became hypervigilant. I became very attuned to everybody around me. And, it started as a young child, kind of watching my father, who could be violent, and sort of watching, trying to read his moods. I got really good at that. I got really good at reading people's moods. And knowing, is he dangerous? It's kind of like being around a dangerous animal, or can I relax? And so rather than being centered in myself, all of my reactions to the world were based on what someone around me was doing or not doing. And I carried that into adulthood and ended up, I think one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why people end up using drugs and alcohol and food or any other obsessive compulsive behavior as a way of trying to self-medicate is because this creates so much stress and tension to constantly be watching what other people are doing and trying to read them. There's just no place to relax around that. And the things about drugs and alcohol is they take on a life of their own. So I became an addict and an alcoholic at a pretty early age. So things, Transformation House is a part of the Venus Rising Association for Transformation. And I found my way to this organization in 2000 after I had I'd already been alive for a long time and doing a lot of what we call field research on many different levels. And part of the process that I learned in Venus Rising was how to pull myself back to myself. And transformation was really born out of a desire to support people who, very often people who've done a lot of workshops, sometimes they haven't, a lot of retreats, sometimes they haven't, but they're people who have reached a crossroads in life where their life simply isn't moving forward and it isn't working. It isn't moving and transforming and changing in the way that they want.
Right.
And so the question becomes why?
Right.
You know, very often, not always, but very often, these are people who've already done a lot of work. As a program, we do not take people who are in active addiction.
Right.
We support them in getting into rehab or whatever it might be, so that they're not using their drug of choice. Now, there are exceptions to that, people who are using food or people who are in extreme codependency, you know, and what that means, again, for me, is not being centered in self. You know, it's when I'm watching what other people are thinking, doing, and feeling, I'm in having, you know, those are codependent moments, rather than thinking about what I'm doing, thinking, and feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, attention is outside. So basically, nobody's home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that suffering around there being nobody home that creates a huge void in one's life. So we support people if they are in active addiction in getting clean, because the work that we're going to do, you know, going into rehab or whatever they need to do to stop using for a period of time, it can be as little as 2 weeks.
Okay.
They can come in and work with us. A lot of the people who come to us are people who have done a lot of work, and yet there's still something there where they're
like advanced. It can be like the advanced training. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but it's like yeah, an immersion into an intensive, right?
right. Well, you know, people who are listening to this, if they're familiar at all with 12-step programs, you know, very often in program we call Al-Anon the graduate program for AA. And that's because AA's purpose is to help people achieve and maintain sobriety, a very worthy piece. Yeah. And yet, once people have that for a period of time, what's going to start to come up is the codependency piece, which is attempting, you know, having that attention be drawn to what other people are thinking, doing, and feeling, and wanting to control them in some way or manipulate them, which is another way of control. In either case, nobody's home. So, you know, and there is a high correlation. I've read books on this, and they don't really know what the percentage is, but I've read estimates as high as 95% of alcoholics and drug addicts and food addicts were sexually abused or exposed to some type of sexual trauma in childhood.
Yes, I had heard that too, and it was in an interview on NPR, and then I couldn't find the research to back it up, so I was kind of hesitant to say it. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. It was mind-blowing to hear that.
There's a couple of books that I've read. You know, basically, nobody knows for sure because so many people don't remember their sexual trauma, and so they may exhibit, you know, characteristics and personality traits that suggest, such as, you know, severe depression, despondency, lack of life force, lack of, you know, confidence, inability to manifest the things that they want. I mean, these can fall into a lot of different categories, and there can be a lot of different reasons for that. But if we go back to that idea that at a very early age, somebody's ability to decide what they want for themselves and or not just have in their lives is taken away from them, and they're sort of programmed and trained to look outside of themselves, you know, to be hypervigilant in order to feel safe, it sort of makes sense. And that's such a painful place to be, you know, to be in that. So what we do know, Transformation House as a program is highly individualized. And so the way it will work is someone will call up either through a referral, or perhaps they've seen something on Facebook, or they've seen our website, or, you know, someone's suggested that they, you know, give us a call. And usually they end up talking to me first. I'm the program manager. So I will, you know, talk to them about what's going on. And people will present with so many things. Sometimes it really is someone who's having trouble with chronic relapse. Sometimes it will be someone who's never used a drug in their life, but they have people around them who have used alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're in codependent relationships with people who do use. Maybe it's none of that applies. Maybe there's food. Maybe they escape through television, video games, gambling, shopping, exercise, bulimia, anorexia, whatever it might be. whatever it is, they know that their full attention in their life isn't on what they want to do, that there's a lot of time in their life that's wasted away in various processes, and they just are not feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
And what I hear most often is, I just know I'm meant to be something more than what I am right now. And so what I know then is that there's something going on. We don't know what it is. But based on who they are, based on which of these wide array of, I'm not going to call them symptoms, but behaviors that they present,
yeah.
We have a large staff that we can draw from. And so we put together a very individualized program for that person. And sometimes in Transformation House, there might be just one person. Sometimes there's two. There might be as many as 5. And they might be different types of, experiences. Somebody may have dealt with drugs and alcohol in their life. Somebody not. Maybe they were married to an alcoholic. Maybe somebody else has food issues. So, that's okay, because the underlying issues are remarkably the same.
Interesting.
Family of origin issues, there's either neglect or trauma, sexual trauma, abuse.
Neglect. And that wound, that core wound, comes back to self-worth, maybe?
It certainly, when you think of being a child who is neglected or betrayed, and certainly sexual abuse, molestation is a huge betrayal of the childhood trust. And it's also very confusing for the child.
Yeah.
Because so often they're told, don't tell, this is our little secret, this is special. Their body might respond, because bodies do, babies and children are very sensual beings, while their mind is trying to figure out what's going on here. There's something not right about this. No wonder, so many, children will find something to self-medicate with at a very early age, and it'll go on into adulthood and repeat itself in some way as an adult.
Yeah.
So, that's what we start to uncover, and it's not uncommon to find some kind, again, someone like me, I can't say I was ever, sexually abused, but I know there were very murky sexual boundaries. It's like, what's going on here? This doesn't feel comfortable. This is weird. I know that there's something weird about this.
Yeah.
If the abuse happened, as you know, if the abuse happened before cognition, it's not going to be readily available for memory, right? There's no brain function developed yet that can remember and bring forth, oh, I was abused when I was a baby. But we know it happens, and we know that there are people and children that are subjected to that, but the body remembers, and trauma lives in the body.
Right.
So, so it's there, and they're going to continue to respond in some way until the work that we do is geared toward going back and clearing that early trauma. So.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's something you could say to someone who may be listening who may have had sexual trauma, but they've mentally overridden the emotional and the physical, and maybe they're overcompensating with something that seems healthy, like exercise or something. Something that's giving them a prosperous life. They're exercising, they're working a lot. From the outside looking in, you look at a successful, happy, healthy person. But what might that kind of person be missing out on?
In some ways, that's something for them to look at and for them to answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, someone might look at the outside and say, well, you should be having difficulties or whatever. But if they don't feel like they're having difficulties at this point,
so they're fine.
Not, right? Yeah, they're fine. However, if they look around in their life and look at the kinds of relationships they have, one of the most, both exercise and workaholism, which are two of the ways that people might compensate or, filling their life up with endless activities so that they have no time for themselves, which works until it doesn't work. It's interesting because it's no different than alcohol or drugs. It works until it doesn't work. And when
Mhm.
it doesn't work, it's when they're either working so hard, they're exhausted, their body gives out, and they start to have physical symptoms of some sort. You know, they get sick so they don't have to go to work because they're so tired of working all the time. Or, you know, they get too thin from exercising. It becomes obsessive. They have to have those 2 hours or 3 hours of exercise every day. When they start to look at this and start to realize that they're being driven by anxiety, which is what frequently comes up in these situations, and they just can't stop. And
Mhm.
there's all the things about where's the pleasure in life, where's the relaxation, where's the ability to receive,
Yeah.
you know, because that's the big thing, you know, that a child and a young adult, or even an adult who has been sexually traumatized, quite understandably, will put up barriers against receiving.
Right.
And if we cut ourselves off from our ability to receive, we cut ourselves off from all kinds of things, including intimacy.
Yeah.
It means then that we have a very difficult time with just sort of sitting back and allowing life to come into us.
Even like spiritually, right? Even like
Yeah.
connecting to the divine.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And intimate relationships and
Yeah.
close friendships, all of those things. Instead, we might be out there working or exercising or shopping or whatever it might be. And there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of activity. I tend to think that, you know, people's energy moves up in their body instead of down because, again, understandably, you don't want to go down. That's where the pain is. That's where the fear, that's where the trauma is. You
Yeah.
know, so at a certain point, people might begin to feel like they're missing something. They're only living half of their life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can relate to
And they
that.
want the rest back.
Yeah.
They don't even necessarily know what that means. That's okay. I hear that a lot. I don't know what I mean by this, but something's missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. I hear you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We can work with this. We don't need to know. You don't need to know. The work that we do will begin to uncover. You know, it's not for us to tell you what it is that you're missing, but we provide the container. And the first thing we try to do, Leslie, and this is important to us, is create a container where people feel safe.
Thank you.
Because people who have experienced sexual trauma don't feel safe.
And I was, yes, and I'm being a survivor myself, can say that I didn't know what safety was, and I wasn't aware that I didn't feel safe. I didn't know enough about boundaries to know where I stopped and started. Like kind of you were saying, nobody's home. I think that I may have come in and out of being connected to myself and then disconnected, but really only and still learning about boundaries at 55 years old, you know, just still wonder, you know, still very curious about that elusive thing of what is safe and what isn't safe. Starting to feel that my body has the wisdom to tell me as I learn to hear it from my body. Yeah.
I think the piece around safety is complicated because in one sense, this is not a safe world. That's
Right.
very real. You know, that child within who's traumatized, or the young adult, the teenager within, or the, you know, young person in their 20s, you know, male or female, who has been sexually used in some way. It's not safe. There's nothing about this that was safe. So the question is, for me, so much about how can I feel safe, rather, how can I trust myself to make good decisions in a world where safety is questionable. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
how can I trust myself to put myself in situations where I'm not going to be abused again? I'm not going to abuse myself
Yes.
in some way, because excessive work, you know, the things that we end up doing in order to avoid being in contact with ourselves, you know, the kind of the medicating behaviors, whether they be drugs, alcohol, food, work, sex itself sometimes, you know, odd the way sometimes. And I think there's a lot of shame for people around this. People who have been sexually abused sometimes end up finding themselves obsessed with sex as adults, and that can be very painful for people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's understandable when if it was in that they ended up in a kind of a sexual abusive relationship where the only praise that they got and the only sense of love that they got was from their abuser. So that's not uncommon. So there's so much confusion around not feeling like we can trust the outside world, but also not being in a trust relationship with oneself. And that's what has to come first, because then we can make a decision about where we want to put ourselves, the people that we want to be with, the situations we want to put ourselves in. When we want to walk away, when we want to say, no, thank you.
I think my cat just jumped off the couch.
I saw your kitty. Very cute.
So what I was going to say, oh gosh, I had a question right when that happened, and it has to do with, tell me again what you just said.
No, can I remember? Knowing that we can trust ourselves to walk away
and putting yourself in safe places, recognizing, trusting if it's a safe place or not, and knowing that you can say no and remove yourself.
Right.
That was a really big step for me, the piece around recognizing that I have a choice right now as an adult, no longer a child, to remove myself from this situation where the freeze, I was talking to, I think it was Starwolf, about the freeze response in the nervous system, because that would be the way that I would normally respond to things. Like just an example of the freeze. If I didn't realize until the past few years how that autonomic nervous system, and it's related to the parasympathetic and the vagus nerve, I'm learning through the polyvagal theory with Stephen Porges' work, that my response in a lot of times is to freeze. And an example I was going to say is I had someone backing out of a parking space and they were coming towards my car. I didn't have the quick response to hit the horn. I had the freeze, they were coming right at me at a snail's pace, and it was an older person and they didn't see me, and I froze. And I have a little ding in my brand new car because of that. So and then I started learning more about this polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, and that sympathetic response of freeze that happens after the fight and the flight didn't work. And apparently then we go into the freeze.
And some people become more attached to fight or flight. So it's, in the world of addictions, we understand that under all addictions is codependency. So under all addictions is a person who basically isn't comfortable in here and has a tendency to go out in the world. Now, one of the ways that they might try to manipulate situations out in the world is by freezing. If I'm just invisible, I won't get hurt. If I don't, you won't see me.
Yep.
Or, flight, I'm out of here. And disassociation is a kind of flight, soul loss. Part of us just leaves. So I'm not here. How many people have talked about literal disassociating experiences during a rape, where they find themselves up watching it and they're detached? And that piece of detachment can become very comfortable whenever we encounter stress. I'm just going to go out here and watch from a distance. This is happening to me. I'm not home, right?
I have that one. I have learned, and then when you're talking about this, is fascinating to me, because I think I've had these little aha moments throughout my life and these awarenesses, and that's one of them, because I've had people tell me that I wasn't present or I wasn't grounded. I was like, what are they talking about? I'm so present. I'm the queen of body awareness. But I guess I have an addiction to checking out.
Well, yeah, it's careful. We have to be careful using that word addiction.
Okay.
But it is it's the learned response.
Yeah.
To certain kinds of stressful situations, right?
It doesn't really serve me. Maybe it did for a time.
It absolutely did. When you were, when you think of a child who's completely powerless in the situation, that's the difference between adults or a young adult who's being manipulated by a person in power, you know, or any place. You know, people will find themselves in situations where they're being manipulated by another person sexually or in other ways. They have no power in that situation. Women who are, or men who are caught in an abusive relationship, you know, domestic abuse, they have no power at that time. So if checking out is smart, you know, it keeps them alive. That's their survival mechanism for now.
Yeah.
But when the situation changes through whatever combination of circumstances, whether it's simply from growing up, breaking out of the situation, a death, whatever it might be, we're in that habitual response pattern that no longer serves.
Right.
Flight is one too. You know, people will come out swinging, you know, they become very angry, you know, and it'll certainly keep people at a distance, right?
Right.
But is that what we really want? You know, when I hear a woman or a, you know, young man, you know, like, oh, yeah, you know, I don't have any relationships, and I can hear the anger in the voice. It's like, okay, is that where you want to be? You know, we want to keep everyone at arm's length that way. We can, you know, sometimes boundaries become barriers.
Right. Well, you know, as you're speaking about these nervous system responses that become kind of habitual. So take the word addiction off and say habitual.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are in an awakening time, the work that you guys are doing at Transformation House is about awakening. It's becoming more conscious. So this practice of becoming awakened or conscious is learning how to be the observer of how these responses are showing up, not judging. Nothing's wrong. It's all perfect, and it's imperfections, but it's perfect. So you know, is there more you'd like to say about the consciousness of awakening at Transformation House and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I would. You know, I listened to your interview with our founder and director and our spiritual director, Linda Starwolf, and she talked a little bit about shamanic breathwork, which was one of our primary tools. And the piece about Transformation House is that as you're going through the process, you know, we have a trajectory where we really invite people to kind of come in and sort of let go of everything, let go of what they think they know, because whatever they think they know have gotten them where they are, and they're not satisfied with it. It's not working. It's not where they want to be. So we first of all have to let go of what we think we know. And the beauty of the things that we use, shamanic breathwork, which is a very somatic technique, a breathing technique that takes people into their body, sometimes into emotional states, even to the trauma itself, but it's very helpful for releasing trauma in the body. So first we have to release. We use breath work, we use art processes, we use group processing, we use dance, we use yoga. Again, it's all individually tailored. So what's going to be appropriate for that individual person? You know, we have an amazing transpersonal psychologist who works with us. So people have more cognitive sessions with her, but a lot of the processes that we do, whether they're art or music or dancing or whatever it might be, is more experiential. Now, the whole idea with this is allowing oneself to have the experiential processes to allow emotions, which maybe sometimes are emotions that haven't been tapped into for a long time, that have been pushed away, resisted, all kinds of emotions. Our objective is to create a safe container. So anger might come up. Can we create a safe enough container where people can be angry and not hurt us or hurt themselves?
Yeah.
You know, often people who suffer from sexual healing would do a lot of self-harm, you know, cutting, different various modes of physically hurting themselves, you know, pushing the envelope and the places and situations that they put themselves in. So there's a process of release. Through that process of release, I mean, I think of it in a way, Leslie, it's almost like allowing yourself to kind of dismantle and unravel and unwind so that things can then come together in new ways.
Yeah.
So many of the same pieces then start to weave themselves in new ways. And that's where the awareness comes in and the consciousness. Along with that, we give people tools so that they can recognize triggers. It's so important when you have particularly trauma. When we're talking about body trauma, someone gets triggered. It's kind of like the standard, thing of the combat vet who comes back and he's walking down the street and there's a backfire and he's suddenly behind a car and he didn't know how that happened, but there he is.
Mm-hmm.
There's that parasympathetic immediate response to stimulus. This backfire, he's just going to do what he has to protect himself.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's going to encounter triggers. And so recognizing what one's triggers are, what kinds of situations, this is what we do toward the end of our process with the people that we work with, so that they can start to recognize, okay, if I go to that place, I'm going to get triggered. Who's a big trigger? My mom. Okay, well, it doesn't mean I never see my mom again, or I don't, but I might need to make sure I surround myself with certain behaviors, go to see mom, in a way that's going to ensure that if things start to heat up, I can take care of myself. Through these processes, people are learning how to live life and how to go out and be in work situations, family situations, that they know how to take care of themselves. They begin to trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I can say no. I know if someone says this to me or asks me this question or behaves this way to me, I know what I can do. I can take a minute before I say yes, or I can say, I don't want to do that. What a concept.
Right.
So, yeah. And so then they can begin to trust themselves. Oh, I know how to listen to myself. I know what works for me. I know that if I work, a particularly stressful day, I need a bath at the end of the day. I don't need a drink. I need a bath. I need a walk in nature. I need to pet my cat. So they learn to trust themselves, that they can give themselves what they need, because they didn't learn in earlier in their life. Or maybe they were learning, but then the trauma happened, the sexual trauma that kind of took it all away, and they got lost for a while in this place where they don't know how to come home to themselves and to make decisions based on their own internal guidance system. So a lot of what we do is get them back in touch with that guidance system.
Yeah.
So
Valuable, so beautiful. Love this.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys do good work. I know I haven't gone through the transformation house, although I have done the breath work with facilitators. I've been a part of that. That's been a very important part of my journey, the priestess process. I did 8 cyclical years of priestess work, and the breath work was a big part of that, and trance dance, or breath dance and movement and art and all of that. I just we're just coming close to the end of our interview, but I wanted to point out for anybody who's listening who may be well on their way to their healing journey, or someone who may not have taken the first step, that courageous first step to tell your story, to reach out for some support, to go looking for support. I know I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't about to tell anybody what happened to me. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think I mattered. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't even know that's why I was having the challenges in relationships and at work that I was having at the time. I was in my late 20s when I went to my first personal growth workshop, and I really wasn't going to do it. Somebody took me by the hand and said, hey, I've got this really cool workshop I went to. I was a trusted friend, and I went. But what I want to point out is that the Joyous Heart Network, the organization that I have founded, we have been for the past 2 years very slowly raising money, and the money that we're raising is scholarship funds. It's scholarship funds to support someone who may, or people who, and family members. It's not just the person that's having the, as you said earlier, Ruby, it's not just the person that's actually in the survival mode, or the had the trauma. It's also the family and loved ones who want to learn how to heal themselves from the codependency, so they can actually be more of a support to the loved ones, right?
Yes, indeed.
There's so, all of us have a little wound in us that needs healing, but the money that we're raising is to be, it's partial scholarships at this point, because we're just starting out in our fundraising over the last 2 years, and we want people who have had some kind of trauma, sexual abuse, childhood or adult, family members who are wanting to heal so that they can be more supportive to those loved ones, to reach out to us at Joyous Heart Network. Let us know if we can help you, and we will do our best. These are partial scholarships, and we'd like, would you like to say how much the cost of the Transformation House is?
Yeah, a standard 2-week program is $8,000, which includes lodging. It does not include food unless the person specifically presents with issues around food that they want to address. They want to learn how to eat healthily, or it's not uncommon for people, again, with sexual trauma or any kind of trauma, to engage in emotional eating or emotional restricting. So if that's specifically something that they want to work with, then we work in food into their program. Otherwise, people pretty much take care of their own food. I want to point out that if you go to a, we're not a rehab facility, but if you do go into a rehab facility, it's anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for 2 weeks or more. And of course, many of these programs are paid by insurance. We do not accept insurance, and there's a reason, because we are a bit out of the box, and that we have found that is what works. And when I say out of the box, we do work with shamanic breath work. We do work with Reiki. We work with all kinds of alternative modalities that we find to be effective. And we also work one-on-one, a great deal of one-on-one work. It's a very low student to or participant to facilitator ratio. So very often one-on-one or 2 participants with one facilitator. And you're just not going to find that in any kind of traditional facility, rehab or codependency rehab facilities. So that's what we offer. So it's very intensive, and it's very highly individualized. We put the program together very specifically to address the needs of the person that comes. Now, that being said, we know $8,000 is a lot of money, and we also don't know how to do it for any less, because it's an expensive program to run. What I would say to you is that this is wonderful. We've been really longing for some type of partial scholarship support so that we can, assist people who don't have the funds but know that they belong here and that they need this kind of one-on-one work. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we raise lots of money March 3rd, just 2 weeks away. We're doing a fundraiser, and we're making this video partly to raise awareness about March 3rd's event here in Atlanta at the Unitarian Universalist Church. And it's from 1:30 to 5 p.m. Tickets are very low. You could pay $1, $5, $10, whatever you want, up to $50 or more. We'll receive whatever you're able to give us for this event, so that we can raise that scholarship fund. And everybody's welcome. It's a workshop, and it's actually going to be a discussion panel, just a short, brief discussion panel. But then we're going into a sacred healing process for anybody who wants to come in and open their heart and find a connection with themselves, with the others, and with spirit. So hopefully we'll have nice participation there.
That's wonderful.
It's going to be great. And yes, and we will make sure that people know how to find Transformation House. And your website is can you say the website again?
www.shamanicbreathwork, that's all one word, .org. And you can also email us at Venus Rising, one word, Venus Rising, like the planet, at shamanicbreathwork.org, or call 828-631-2305, and I'll call you back.
Yay, awesome. Thank you so much, Ruby. Oh my gosh, I feel like I just received a session by being with you. I'm going to go take a bath tonight. I'm going to take a bath.
Good. Me too. Overlap.
Okay, until we meet again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.